Welcome back to Real Stories, Real Families, the podcast where we explore the unique journeys of families from all different walks of life. Today, I'm joined by Jane Lynn and Booty Santoso, a couple living in Silver Spring, Maryland, who are here to share their story. Jane, Booty, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, excited to be here.
So let's start by hearing a little about how you two met. You're both pretty career-driven, and from what I understand, you've built quite a life together here in Silver Spring.
Oh, yeah. Well, we met at a networking event, actually. I'm an architect and Booty's a civil engineer, so we kind of connected over that. I remember we started talking about building designs and it just clicked, you know? We love geeking out about architecture.
Yeah, exactly. I think I made some cheesy joke about bridges, and somehow that worked. But yeah, we've always had this shared passion for design, and that's been a big part of our relationship from the start.
That's awesome. So now you're both well established in your fields, and I know you're starting to think about the future, especially in terms of starting a family. How's that conversation been going?
It's a mix of excitement and a lot of anxiety, honestly. We've both been so focused on our careers that we're now like, okay, how do we fit a baby into all this? It's hard to imagine juggling everything.
Yeah, and like we already struggle with work-life balance as it is. We're constantly talking about how we'll manage when there's a little one in the picture. I mean, we love what we do, but we also don't want to be the kind of parents who are always working, you know?
That makes sense. And then there's the cultural aspect too, right? You're both from different backgrounds. Jane, you're Taiwanese American, and Booty, you're Indonesian American. How does that come into play when you're thinking about raising kids?
Oh, for sure. It's something we think about a lot. We're really proud of our heritages, and we want to make sure our future kids appreciate both. But it's also tricky because we don't want them to feel like they have to choose one culture over the other. Like, during Lunar New Year and Eid, how do we make both special without overwhelming them?
Yeah, and even now we sometimes have these small cultural differences that come up. I mean, they're not huge, but when we talk about family traditions or expectations, there are these little moments where we realize, oh, that's different for you. I think it's going to be even more pronounced when we have kids. But we're learning to communicate better about it. It's just, it's a lot to figure out.
That sounds like a delicate balance. What kind of things come up when you talk about future parenting, especially with both your cultural backgrounds in mind?
Well, for one, there's the whole question of language. Jane's family speaks Mandarin and mine speaks Bahasa Indonesia. So we're wondering, how do we introduce both languages without confusing our kids?
Exactly. I mean, we want them to be bilingual, ideally trilingual, but we also know that's a lot to ask. And it's hard when you're not living in a place where they hear those languages every day. Plus, we're in the US, so English is obviously going to be dominant.
Right, and it's not just language. We're also trying to figure out how to blend the different customs and values. Like in Indonesian culture, family is super important, and there's a lot of emphasis on respect for elders. I think that's something we definitely want to pass on. But there are times when Jane's family has different expectations, and we have to talk about what makes sense for us as a family.
Yeah, and even though we have a lot of shared values, there are still moments where we approach things differently. Like during the holidays or when we talk about how to raise kids, we're realizing we come from two pretty different worlds, even if it doesn't always feel that way day to day.
That's really interesting. Do you find that those cultural differences create any tension, or is it more of an ongoing conversation?
I wouldn't say it creates tension, but there are definitely moments where we're like, oh, wait, that's not how I would have thought about it. We try to stay open and talk things through. Like just the other day, we were talking about how we'll handle discipline with our future kids, and we realized that our families had very different approaches growing up. So we're figuring out what will work for us.
Yeah, we try to keep it light and remind ourselves that we're a team. But there are definitely moments where we have to take a step back and say, okay, how do we make sure we're not just defaulting to what's familiar from our own upbringings?
That's a really healthy way to approach it. So you've talked a lot about the pressures of balancing career and family and even cultural differences. Do you ever face external pressures as an interracial couple, or is it more internal challenges you're navigating?
It's a mix. I mean, we're lucky to live in a pretty diverse area, so we don't face a lot of outright racism or anything like that. But there are these subtle things, like microaggressions, people making assumptions about who we are or where we're from, or Sometimes people don't even realize we're a couple at first, and that can be awkward.
Yeah, and it's not always obvious. It's just these little comments or looks sometimes, but it adds up. I think we've gotten used to it, but we do worry about how it might affect our kids someday. Like, how do we prepare them for the world when we don't even have all the answers ourselves?
Right. We've talked about how we want to make sure our kids grow up confident in who they are. But it's tough when the world can sometimes make them feel like they have to explain themselves, just because of their background.
That's a really important conversation. It sounds like you're both putting a lot of thought into how you'll approach parenting and how to navigate those complexities. What keeps you grounded through all these big decisions?
For me, it's our partnership. Jane and I have always been good at communicating. Well, we try to be. Haha, we know we're in this together, and even when things get hard, we can lean on each other.
Same for me. I think we're both really driven by our love for each other and our shared goals. We want to build a family, but we also want to stay connected to our cultures and careers. It's all part of who we are, and I think that's what keeps us moving forward.
That's beautiful. You two seem to have such a strong bond, and I'm sure whatever comes next for you, you'll navigate it with the same thoughtfulness and care. Thank you both for sharing your story today.
Thank you. It was great to talk about this.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Real Stories, Real Families. We'll catch you next time with another story about the joys and challenges of family life.